right, welcome back. If you're watching at home, welcome back. For those of you here, welcome back. We're going to talk a little bit about retail space. And remember, this is just an introduction. So I had a couple questions about clear span height and what's a good height. The answer is, hell, I don't know, because you're going to need to understand your client's needs. What are they bringing in? Are they stacking washers and dryers? Because those have a certain height as opposed to stacking shoe boxes. So there is no perfect height. But when you get with your client, those are questions that come about in counseling. That's why you have to understand what your client need, especially tenant reps. What are my client manufacturing? What are they bringing in? Are they bringing in boxes of tennis shoes so they can put outfits together? Or are they bringing in boxes of steel coils because they're putting truck beds together? Big difference in what industrial building I need, okay? Don't mean to keep going on what we were just done. So let's move forward to retail. Now, everything that doesn't fit in office or industrial is retail. All right? It's not a really good definition, but it's the best that I could really come up with that I think if it's not office space, meaning front-end office kind of workers, or it's not the other workers, I was almost said blue collar, and I'm sure that I would have got some nasty hate mails from somebody doing the manufacturing portion, you're dealing with retail. Typically, the easiest way to determine is ask yourself this. Does your client sell to a consumer? And I mean like a public consumer. Obviously, we all sell to consumers. Lawyers sell their business. GM sells to consumers. But I mean, are they selling to a consumer that walks in the store, buys something, and walks out? Drugstores, restaurants, strip centers, multi-tenant strip centers, single tenant. Hotels and motels actually have a special designation, but I mean, it would be considered probably retail. Chain stores, like in the malls, Lazarus and Macy's and all those. So I'm assuming you get the picture. That's the different categories. We like to call these, there's other ones that we call in the business called the mom and pop. The mom and pop typically is a retail space where they don't have any national tenants in it. So there's no Subway, there's no Kroger, there's no hair cutting place that's a national. Typically what you've got are 4 or 5 units, all with small independent kind of, there's a bakery store, maybe there's a barber, a nail salon, and a local hamburger store. That might be what we would call mom and pop. All right. Now, here's probably your biggest issue with retail, and I'm going to gloss over it the fastest. All right. The tenant mix in the strip center is probably the biggest issue that you are going to have a problem with in most retail issues. Because here's what happens. Especially now, let's back up. If you're tenant repping, that's where your problem's going to be. If you're selling, you also could have this problem because I dealt with a buyer that we were looking at strip centers, and every time we looked at a strip center, he would find a problem with one of the tenants insofar as he just didn't believe in that business and would say, well, I don't think they're going to be in there long, so I have a problem. So let me give you a good example. We looked at a strip center. In that strip center, and this was years ago, was one of those homemade pottery places where you would actually go in and they had a kiln, and you would fire the pottery yourself. He did not believe in that business as being a viable, long-term business, and he was afraid to buy the strip center simply because of the tenant that was there. Now, if the tenant would have been Subway, he might have held a whole different thing. So tenant mix is a problem, both a benefit if it's a good mix, and a detriment if it's a bad mix for either side of this deal. both buyers, sellers, and tenant reps, okay? The other issue you've got with tenant mix, especially on the tenant rep side, hold on, is let me give you an example. I had a client that was a pizzeria. We looked at a strip center. They loved the demographics around there. They loved the traffic count. They loved all of that. They liked the rental space numbers. We couldn't rent the space from them. Why? Here's why. Subway was in this strip center. When Subway, which everybody wants to put, it's the number one franchise right now to put in a strip center is a Subway, because it's a very popular place to go eat, attracts a lot of people. So this owner of the strip center, which I knew the owner, put Subway in, pays good money, and attracts a lot of, or what they call backfills, a lot of the other spots, because while people are going to eat Subway at lunch, they're going to backfill into some of these other places like getting their nails done or taking their dry cleaning or getting a haircut. So Subway's a really good tenant to help you fill other tenants, all right? But here's the problem. Because Ted wanted them in there so bad, he signed a lease with them that gave them exclusive rights on Subway sandwiches in that strip center. Sound funny? Well, it's not. Very common. So what I'm telling you is my pizzeria that was also sold sub sandwiches couldn't move in because they were in direct competition with a tenant that was already there. The tenant mix screwed my client from getting in. Now, ultimately what happened was my client agreed voluntarily to remove subs off of their menu, and actually we did solve the deal. But it's that kind of thinking that's going to cause you to either pull your hair out at first or thump your chest when you get the good idea, all right? So that's what happened. The tenant mix was a problem. There's also been issues, and I've heard of this. I've never been involved in a deal, but I know Kirkendalls over here that own Ohio properties, and it's my understanding that they had a deal where when they talked to the lender that loaned them the money to buy the property, the lender did not approve the tenant because the lender thought the tenant was going to pay below market rate and could potentially put the mortgagor, i.e. Ohio Properties, into issues with paying the rent. So the bank actually had a say-so in the tenant that went in. Get that? That's pretty funny. Now, if that's not true, I apologize to the Kirkendalls, and I know those guys, but I had heard that story through the grapevine. And they are good rentals, and I know Nick. Matter of fact, I gave Nick his license and see him a lot down here. But that issue comes up with tenant mix. More notably, you get exclusive rights. I mean, you're never going to put a Galleons and a Gander Mountain. Galleons doesn't even around, say Dick's and a Gander Mountain in the same spot, because one's not going to like it and one probably will have asked for exclusive. I want to be the only sporting goods seller in the mall. And if you do, I'll sign the lease, sign you a 20-year lease, whatever, yada, yada, yada. So, I've just glanced over it real quickly. It is actually going to be an issue for you. Same thing happens, when you go to sell the property, tenant mix could be, because your new buyer is going to come in and go, look, you've got a mom and pop store. Nobody's financially strong. They're not on long leases. And you've got, two pizzerias, a nail, and a video store. Ooh, video stores are dying. Pizzerias die daily. Video stores may be here tomorrow, may not. That could potentially be a bad tenant mix for me, and therefore the value is not what you think it is. So it is an issue when dealing in retail space. Inline versus in cap. Inline means you are one of the spaces on the interior of the building. Typically lower rent in line than the end cap. The end cap is usually sometimes called the anchor, and usually is a more expensive spot than the inline. And most owners, and I've dealt with one just recently, who would not put a client in the end cap because their use did not dictate an end cap. Now, you're looking at me like I'm crazy, because there are specific clients that need the end cap. Banks want drive-through, where you can't drive through the middle of the building, so they need the end cap so they can have the drive-through. Starbucks likes the end cap, where they can have a drive-through. How about some of the others? Any of the pharmacies, they want an end cap. So this person did not need that requirement, and the owner of the building said, I'm not putting you in. Sorry, I've got no space for you. And they said, but you got an open 5,000 square foot. That's what we want. He's like, yeah, but you're not going to pay me what a person that needs that spot would pay. Because a bank's going to pay because they not only are getting the rental space, they've also got some drive-through space. As a non-drive-through space using tenant, you're not going to want to pay that. So inline versus end cap can be another issue when dealing with rental space. And there are buildings that are built solely to put end cap people in. You know, like I said, you've got to look for that person that maybe needs that end cap. You are probably not going to put an attorney on a space that has a drive-through. They're more suited for an end cap. You know, and there's some other things, and once again, I got to bite my tongue because I just want to teach so much, and it's, sometimes less is more. Some owners have the ability to move tenants. You know, I'll put you in the end cap, but if I renegotiate with the bank that once the end cap, I'm going to move you to an inline space and release that to the bank, and I have the right to do that because it's going to go in your lease, or I won't sign you the lease. All right? Tenant improvements, much more common for the actual tenant to do this. So if you are a tenant rep, remember, you're going to rent what they call a white box. Literally, that's what it looks like. You've got the four walls, nothing inside, and if it's a brand new white box, typically there's not even a floor. You know, there may be the back half of the floor where the bathrooms have been poured, and the front half maybe still is pea gravel because the owner is waiting to pour the floor until they move in. Now, if it's a Class B space where there's been used before and repurposed, then it may already have a floor. But what I'm telling you is Walden Books has a different build out than Speedway. Not Speedway, Subway. All right? And because I can't, as an owner, get ready for that, I just rent a white box, and then the tenant builds it out. And that's called tenant improvements, or TI. All right? And once again, here's where the negotiation comes in. Let's go back to the Subway. Because Ted wanted Subway in so bad, he was willing to give concessions, i.e. in the form of credit for building the property. So the tenant comes in and says, hey, I need delis, I need vents, I want the yellow walls for Subway. And Ted's like, okay, whatever you do, I'll give you 80% credit in rent. So if you spend 10 grand, I'll give you 8,000 in rent in credit. That's an example. Some people don't get anything. Hey, you're buying the last rental space. If it's open, it's open. If it's not, that's not. You want to put your brand new accounting company in, I'll rent it to you at market rate, but you're doing your own tenant build out, which you typically have to get approved by the landlord. So you can't go in and make it look like the inside of a cave. Oh, I put new plaster. No, here's the plan. Here's what our build out's going to look like, yada, yada, yada. And the guy approves it, okay? Any questions about retail space? And I know you've got hundreds of questions. For those of you at home, if you've got questions, email me, help@myrealu.com, or give me a call. Once again, this is an intro class, all right? So I'm sure that you've probably got questions.